My husband stood up at a family gathering and declared his mistress as his true wife in front of everyone. My billionaire father sat quietly. Then he immediately made one phone call. My name is Julissa, and I am 32 years old. That evening I was sitting at my Aunt Patricia's anniversary celebration, surrounded by crystal chandeliers and familiar faces, when the man I had trusted with my whole heart rose from his chair and reached for another woman's hand. I watched my father's expression remain perfectly still, but something in his eyes told me everything was about to change. Before I share what happened next, let me know where you are watching from today. Drop your location in the comments below, hit that like button, and make sure you subscribe so you do not miss how this story unfolds. Trust me, you will want to hear what my father did with just one phone call. I never wanted anyone to love me for my father's money. Growing up as the only daughter of Raymond Harrington, one of the most successful tech and real estate billionaires in the country, I learned early that people often wore masks. I watched classmates suddenly want to be my best friend when they discovered who my father was. I saw business associates laugh too loudly at his jokes and agree with everything he said. By the time I turned 20, I had become an expert at recognizing insincerity. So when I graduated from design school and decided to pursue my passion for interior design, I made a choice that confused everyone around me. I rented a small apartment on the east side of the city, far from my parents' mansion. I used my mother's maiden name, Morgan, on all my professional documents. I drove a modest sedan instead of the luxury vehicles parked in my family's garage. I wanted to build something that belonged entirely to me, something that had nothing to do with the Harrington name. My father understood. He sat me down the day I moved out, his hands wrapped around a cup of coffee, and said something I have never forgotten. The right person will love you for your soul, not your last name. If you have to hide who you are to test someone's intentions, then do it. Better to know the truth before your heart gets too involved. I carried those words with me like armor. 3 years ago, on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, I was working on sketches at a crowded coffee shop downtown. Every table was occupied, and I barely noticed when someone asked if he could share my table. I looked up and saw a man with warm brown eyes and a slightly crooked smile holding a laptop bag and a cup of black coffee. His name was Derek Lawson. He was 32, then working in commercial real estate handling deals that he described as just trying to help people find their perfect spaces. I liked that. It sounded similar to what I did in a way. We talked about architecture, about how buildings could make people feel about the difference between a house and a home. He asked about my work, and I told him I was a freelance interior designer. He did not ask about my family. He did not ask about money. He asked about my favorite color, my favorite season, and whether I preferred sunrise or sunset. When the coffee shop started closing, he apologized for keeping me so long. Before I could respond, he walked to the counter and came back with a blueberry muffin. "You were so focused on your drawings that you forgot to eat," he said. "I noticed you never touched your food." Nobody had noticed something like that about me in years. We started meeting at that same coffee shop every week, then twice a week, then almost every day. Our dates were simple. Picnics in the park where we would spread a blanket and argue about which sandwiches were superior. Movie nights at small theatres that played old films nobody else wanted to see. Cooking dinners together in my tiny apartment, bumping elbows in the narrow kitchen and laughing when we inevitably burned something. Derek always insisted on paying for everything. He would take out his wallet before I could even reach for mine, and when I protested, he would shake his head and say, "I may not be rich, but I will always take care of you." Those words made my heart swell. Here was a man who did not know about my family's wealth, and he was trying so hard to give me everything he could with what little he had. I introduced him to my best friend, Grace, about 4 months into our relationship. She was polite but quiet during dinner, watching Derek more than participating in conversation. Afterward, when he excused himself to the restroom, she leaned over and whispered, "Something feels off. I cannot explain it." I dismissed her concern. Grace was always protective, always suspicious. She did not understand that Derek was different. After a year of dating, Derek proposed. He got down on one knee in the same coffee shop where we had met, right at our usual table. The ring was small, a modest diamond that he had clearly saved months to afford. Tears streamed down my face as I said yes. This was real love, the kind my father had talked about. Derek wanted me for me. But I knew I could not keep the truth from him any longer. If we were going to build a life together, he needed to know everything. I told him I wanted him to meet my parents. He agreed, probably expecting a regular middle-class home in the suburbs. Instead, I drove him through iron gates, past manicured gardens, and up to a mansion that looked like it belonged in a magazine. I watched his face as we pulled up to the entrance, as uniformed staff opened doors and took his coat as my father walked toward us in a hand-tailored suit. "Derek," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "My real name is Julissa Harrington. My father is Raymond Harrington." The colour drained from his face. He stood frozen in the marble foyer, his eyes moving from the crystal chandelier above us to the original artwork on the walls to the sweeping staircase behind my father. He did not speak for what felt like hours. On the drive home, he was silent. I kept glancing at him, my stomach twisted with anxiety. Finally, he pulled over to the side of the road and turned to face me. "Why did you not tell me?" he asked. "Because I needed to know you loved me for me, not for any of this." He was quiet for another long moment. Then he reached for my hand. "This changes nothing. I fell in love with you, not your father's money. I do not care about any of that." Relief washed over me like a wave. I believed him completely. We got married 6 months later. At my request, the ceremony was simple. Just close family and friends held in a garden venue rather than some extravagant ballroom. My father gave us a house as a wedding gift. Derek hesitated before accepting it, which I took as another sign of his integrity. He did not want anything handed to him. He wanted to earn his way. I walked into that marriage believing I had found my forever person. I thought our love story would be one I would tell our grandchildren someday. Looking back now, I realize the cracks were there from the beginning. I just refused to see them. The first 6 months of marriage felt like an extension of our dating days. We settled into our new home, a beautiful 4-bedroom house that my father had given us, and Derek seemed genuinely happy. He would come home from work, wrap his arms around me from behind while I was cooking, and tell me how lucky he was. But slowly, so slowly, that I almost did not notice things began to shift. It started with small comments. We would be having dinner, and Derek would mention something about a colleague who had just gotten a promotion. "Must be nice to have connections," he would say, glancing at me. Or we would drive past one of my father's commercial properties, and he would ask, "Has your dad ever thought about bringing me into his business?" At first, I brushed it off. It was natural for someone to be curious about their spouse's family, right? But the comments became more frequent, more pointed. "Why do you still work so hard?" he asked one evening, watching me hunch over fabric samples for a client project. "Your family has more money than you could ever spend. What is the point?" "Because I love what I do," I replied. "My work is not about money. It is about creating beautiful spaces for people." He shrugged, but I caught something in his expression that I did not recognize. It looked almost like contempt. His spending habits changed too. The man who used to carefully budget for our dates was now buying designer suits and watches that cost more than his monthly salary. When I gently pointed out that we should be saving, he got defensive. "I am your husband," he snapped. "Not some stranger off the street. I think I deserve to live comfortably." I started to feel like a stranger in my own home. Derek worked late more and more often, coming home after I was already in bed. When I tried to plan date nights, he would agree enthusiastically and then cancel at the last minute, citing urgent work deadlines. The weekends we used to spend exploring the city together became weekends of him glued to his phone while I sat alone in the living room. My mother noticed the change in me before I admitted it to myself. During one of our weekly lunches, she set down her fork and looked at me with concerned eyes. "You seem tired, sweetheart. Is everything okay at home?" "Everything is fine," I said, forcing a smile. "Derek is just busy with work. Big deals coming up." She did not look convinced, but she did not push. That was her way. She trusted me to come to her when I was ready. One night, Derek came home smelling like perfume. It was subtle, but unmistakable. A floral scent that was definitely not mine. "What is that smell?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. He barely looked up from his phone. "What smell?" "That perfume. It is on your jacket." He shrugged. "Oh, that. A female colleague bumped into me in the elevator. Must have rubbed off." Something cold settled in my stomach. The explanation made sense, technically. But the way he said it, so dismissive, so unconcerned, it did not feel right. After that night, I started noticing other things. His phone was always face down on tables now. He had changed his password multiple times. He would step outside to take calls, claiming the reception was better on the patio. He guarded his privacy like a man protecting secrets. I told myself I was being paranoid. Derek loved me. He had married me when he thought I was nobody. He would not do anything to hurt me. But the distance between us kept growing. I tried to bridge it. I planned a surprise weekend getaway for our first anniversary, booking a cozy cabin in the mountains where we could reconnect without distractions. I researched hiking trails and wineries nearby, imagined us laughing together like we used to. When I told Derek about it, his face tightened. "I cannot take time off right now," he said. "I have too much going on at work. Maybe next month?" Next month came and went, then another month. The trip never happened. Grace came over one Saturday afternoon bringing wine and concern. She had always been good at reading me, and today she was not going to let me hide. "Talk to me," she said, sitting cross-legged on my couch. "Something is wrong. I can see it all over your face." I wanted to deny it, but suddenly I was too tired to pretend. I told her about Derek's late nights, his secretive phone behavior, the emotional distance that had grown between us like a wall. Grace was quiet for a moment. Then she said something that stopped my heart. "I have been debating whether to tell you this. About 2 weeks ago, I saw Derek at a restaurant downtown. He was having dinner with a woman, and it did not look like a business meeting. My first instinct was to defend him. It was probably just a client. He meets with people all the time." "Julissa." Grace's voice was firm. They were holding hands across the table. I felt the blood drain from my face. "You must have been mistaken. It was probably someone who looked like him." She did not argue. She just looked at me with sad eyes and changed the subject. But her words lodged themselves in my brain like splinters, impossible to ignore. That night, after Derek fell asleep, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. I thought about all the late nights, the secret phone calls, the perfume on his jacket, the way he had pulled away from me so gradually that I had barely noticed until now. I thought about Grace, who had no reason to lie. And I thought about the future I had imagined, the life I had planned crumbling like sand through my fingers. 1 year into my marriage, I decided I needed to save it. Whatever was happening, I could fix it. Derek and I had something special once. We could find it again. I was still clinging to that hope when everything changed. Derek was taking a shower one evening when his phone buzzed on the nightstand. Without thinking, I glanced at the screen. The message preview read, "I miss you. When are you leaving her?" My hands started shaking. I read the words 3 times, 4 times, as if reading them again would somehow change their meaning. But they remained there, glowing on the screen, undeniable. I did not confront him that night. I could not. I put down the phone, walked to the bathroom, and stared at my reflection in the mirror until my eyes blurred with tears. The woman looking back at me was someone I barely recognized. I told myself there had to be an explanation. I was wrong. The morning after I saw that message, I woke up feeling like a different person. The naive, trusting wife who had convinced herself that everything was fine had disappeared somewhere in the night. In her place was someone harder, someone who needed answers. I waited until Derek left for work, then sat down at my desk with my laptop and a notebook. I was going to find out the truth, one way or another. My first step was tracking his schedule. Derek used a shared calendar for work meetings, and I had access to it. I noticed a pattern immediately. Every Tuesday and Thursday, he blocked out 2 hours in the afternoon with no description. Just blank space. When I checked his credit card statements, those days corresponded with charges at a hotel on the other side of the city. My heart cracked a little more with each discovery. I could have confronted him then. I could have thrown the evidence in his face and demanded an explanation. But something told me I needed more. I needed to understand exactly what I was dealing with before I made any moves. I hired a private investigator. His name was Frank Delgado, a former police detective with a reputation for discretion. I sat across from him in his small office, my hands clasped tightly in my lap, and explained my situation. "I need to know everything," I said. "Who she is, how long this has been going on, everything." Frank nodded, his expression professional and unreadable. "I will have a full report for you within 2 weeks." Those 14 days were the longest of my life. I went through the motions of daily existence, smiling at Derek across the dinner table, kissing him goodbye each morning, all while knowing that our marriage was already dead. I felt like an actress in a play performing a role that no longer belonged to me. When Frank called to schedule our follow-up meeting, my hands were trembling so badly I could barely hold the phone. The photos he spread across his desk confirmed everything I had feared. Derek, with a woman I did not recognize, walking hand in hand through a park. Derek and the woman sharing a candle-lit dinner, their faces closed, their eyes locked on each other. Derek kissing her outside an apartment building, his hands cupping her face like she was something precious. "Her name is Megan Sinclair," Frank said. 28 years old. She works at your husband's company as a junior sales associate. According to my sources, their relationship has been going on for approximately 2 years. 2 years. We had only been married for 3. That meant Derek had started cheating on me just 12 months into our marriage. "There is more," Frank continued, pulling out another file. "Megan Sinclair has a history of targeting wealthy married men. Before your husband, she was involved with 2 other executives. Both relationships ended when their wives found out." I stared at the photographs at the woman who had stolen my husband. She was pretty, with calculated eyes and a confident smile. Looking at her, I felt something unexpected bubbling up beneath my grief. Anger. I left Frank's office and sat in my car for an hour, crying until my eyes swelled shut. I mourned the marriage I thought I had. I mourned the future I had envisioned, the children we had talked about, having the growing old together we had promised each other. I mourned the naive girl who had believed love was enough. But when the tears finally stopped, I felt something new taking root inside me. Determination. I called Grace and told her everything. She came over immediately, wrapping me in a hug that lasted several minutes before pulling back to look at me with fierce eyes. "What are you going to do?" she asked. "I am going to be smart about this," I said. "I am not going to confront him until I have a plan." My next call was to my cousin Marcus, the family lawyer. He specialized in corporate law, but he knew enough about divorce proceedings to guide me. I sent him copies of my prenuptial agreement and asked him to review it. His response came the next day. According to the terms, if either party is proven to have engaged in infidelity, they forfeit all claims to assets acquired during the marriage. Derek signed this. If you can prove the affair, he walks away with nothing. I almost laughed. Derek had been so desperate to marry into wealth that he had signed away any potential claim to it. His own greed had been his undoing. For the next 2 weeks, I continued my performance as the oblivious wife. I smiled, I cooked dinner, I asked about Derek's day at work. All the while, I was gathering evidence, building a case that would leave him with no defense. Then came the announcement that changed everything. Aunt Patricia was planning a celebration for her 40th wedding anniversary. It would be held at her estate, a massive gathering with over 100 guests, including family friends and important business associates. The entire Harrington clan would be there, along with some of my father's most influential contacts. Derek seemed unusually interested in the event. "This sounds like a big deal," he said when I told him about it. "Maybe I should invite someone from work. For networking." Something about the way he said it made my skin prickle. "Who did you have in mind?" I asked carefully. "Just a colleague. She has been helping me with some important deals lately. I think she would appreciate the opportunity to meet some real players." She. The word hung in the air between us. "Sure," I heard myself say. "The more the merrier." I did not know then that Derek was planning to turn my family's celebration into his personal stage. I did not know that he intended to humiliate me in front of everyone I loved. But I was about to find out. I thought I was prepared for anything. But what happened at that party was beyond my darkest imagination. The evening of Aunt Patricia's anniversary party arrived with the kind of crisp autumn air that makes everything feel significant. Her estate had been transformed into a wonderland of white flowers, golden lights, and elegantly dressed guests. A string quartet played softly in the corner of the ballroom, while servers in white gloves circulated with champagne trays. I had chosen my outfit carefully that night. A navy blue gown that fit perfectly elegant heels that gave me an extra 3 inches of height, and simple diamond earrings my mother had given me on my wedding day. I wanted to look composed, in control, even though inside I was anything but. My parents arrived together as always, presenting a united front. My father wore his characteristic dark suit, his silver hair perfectly styled, his presence commanding attention without effort. My mother was stunning in burgundy silk, her posture perfect, her smile warm but watchful. They greeted me with hugs and kisses, and my father held my shoulders for a moment longer than usual. "You look beautiful," he said, his eyes searching mine. "Are you all right?" "I am fine." I lied. "Just a little nervous. Big events always make me anxious." He nodded, but I could tell he did not entirely believe me. My father had built a billion-dollar empire by reading people, and I had never been able to fool him completely. The party was in full swing by 8:00. I circulated through the crowd, making small talk with relatives I had not seen in months, accepting compliments on my dress, pretending that my world was not on the verge of collapse. Derek was nowhere to be seen. He had texted me earlier saying he would be running late due to a work emergency. I tried not to think about what that work emergency might actually be. At 8:30, Derek finally walked through the entrance. But he was not alone. On his arm was a woman I recognized instantly from the private investigator's photographs. Megan Sinclair, wearing a red dress that left little to the imagination. Her dark hair cascading over her shoulders, her smile bright and confident. She walked into my family's celebration like she belonged there. The murmurs started immediately. Guests exchanged confused glances. My cousin Marcus caught my eye from across the room, his expression sharp with concern. Aunt Patricia stopped mid-sentence, her champagne glass frozen halfway to her lips. Derek led Megan straight to where I was standing with my mother. He kissed my cheek casually, as if bringing his mistress to a family event was the most normal thing in the world. "Julissa, this is Megan," he said. "The colleague I mentioned. Megan, this is my wife." Megan extended her hand, her smile never wavering. "So lovely to finally meet you. Derek has told me so much about you." I shook her hand because I did not know what else to do. My mother placed a steadying hand on my back, her touch grounding me when I felt like I might float away. "Charmed," I managed to say. The next hour was a blur of agonizing normalcy. Derek and Megan mingled with guests, and to anyone watching they might have appeared to be casual colleagues. But I noticed the way his hand lingered on her lower back. I saw the private smiles they exchanged when they thought no one was looking. I watched my marriage disintegrate in real time in front of everyone I loved. Then came the moment that changed everything. Derek clinked his glass loudly, the sound cutting through the ambient noise of the party. Conversations died down as guests turned to look at him curious about the interruption. "Excuse me, everyone," Derek called out, his voice carrying across the ballroom. "I apologize for interrupting, but I have an important announcement to make." My heart stopped. My father, who had been speaking with an old business partner, turned slowly to face Derek with an unreadable expression. Derek took Megan's hand and pulled her to stand beside him in the center of the room. 100 pairs of eyes watched them waiting. For the past 2 years, Derek began his voice steady and unapologetic. "I have been living a lie. I married Julissa, and yes, she is my wife on paper. But standing here tonight is the woman I truly love. Megan is my real wife in every way that matters." The silence that followed was deafening. I heard my Aunt Patricia gasp, saw my mother's hand fly to her chest, felt the eyes of every person in that room swivel toward me, waiting to see how I would react. Derek was not finished. "I am announcing tonight that I want a divorce from Julissa, and I expect to be treated fairly in the settlement. I have been part of this family for 3 years. I have contributed to this marriage, and I deserve to be compensated for my time." Megan stood beside him, her chin lifted in triumph, looking at me with eyes that sparkled with victory. She had won, and she wanted me to know it. I felt my legs turn to water. The room spun around me, faces blurring into a kaleidoscope of shock and pity. I wanted to scream, to cry, to run away, and never come back. But something kept me rooted to the spot. It was my father. While the rest of the room erupted in whispers and gasps, Raymond Harrington sat perfectly still in his chair near the window. His face betrayed nothing. No anger, no surprise, no distress. He simply watched Derek and Megan with the calm, assessing gaze of a man who had faced countless opponents across boardroom tables and emerged victorious every single time. Aunt Patricia stood up, her face flushed with outrage, ready to unleash on Derek. But my father raised one hand just slightly, and she froze. The silent command in that gesture stopped everyone in their tracks. For what felt like an eternity, my father simply looked at Derek. Then slowly, deliberately, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. He dialed a number, placed the phone to his ear, and spoke exactly 4 words. "It is time. Execute everything." Then he ended the call, slipped the phone back into his pocket, and stood up. The room was absolutely silent. Even Megan's triumphant smile had started to waver. My father walked toward Derek and Megan with measured steps, his polished shoes clicking against the marble floor. When he reached them, he stopped just a few feet away, close enough that they had to tilt their heads up to meet his eyes. "You wanted fair treatment," he said, his voice quiet, but carrying to every corner of the room. "You will get exactly what you deserve." For the first time that evening, I saw fear flicker in Derek's eyes. In that moment, I realized my father had been prepared for this all along, and what happened next would change everything. The room remained frozen as my father turned away from Derek and walked back to his seat. He sat down, calmly adjusted his cuffs, and looked toward the entrance of the ballroom as if expecting someone. Within minutes, the doors opened and Theodore Walsh walked in. He was the Harrington family's attorney, a man who had represented my father for over 20 years. His silver briefcase caught the light as he strode toward us, his expression professionally neutral. "Right on time," my father said quietly. Theodore nodded and set his briefcase on a nearby table, clicking it open to reveal a stack of folders organized with colored tabs. The sound of papers rustling seemed impossibly loud in the silent room. Derek tried to recover his composure. "I do not know what kind of show this is supposed to be," he said, his voice slightly less steady than before. "But I have rights. I was part of this family for 3 years. You cannot just intimidate me into giving up what I am owed." My father did not respond. He simply gestured for Theodore to begin. The attorney cleared his throat and addressed the room. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for interrupting this lovely celebration. However, given the circumstances, I believe some clarification is in order." He opened the first folder. "Mr. Derek Lawson, you signed a prenuptial agreement on June 14th, 3 years ago. According to Clause 7 of that agreement, in the event that either party engages in infidelity during the marriage, that party forfeits all claims to assets acquired during the marriage or belonging to the other spouse." Derek's face paled. That was just a formality. I never thought it would actually be enforced. Theodore continued as if Derek had not spoken. "We have documented evidence of your extramarital affair with Ms. Megan Sinclair, spanning approximately 2 years. Photographs, hotel receipts, witness statements, and digital communications have all been compiled and verified." He slid a folder across the table toward Derek. It landed with a soft thud. "This means," Theodore said, "that according to the terms you yourself agreed to, you are entitled to nothing. Not a single cent from the Harrington family, or from Ms. Julissa Harrington's personal assets." Derek's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. My father finally spoke, his voice measured and cold. "You thought you were clever, did you not? You thought you could humiliate my daughter in front of her family, and then walk away with a fortune. But here is something you should have learned before you tried to play games with me. I do not lose." He stood and walked closer to Derek, his presence suddenly filling the entire space. "I knew about your affair within 3 months of it beginning. I have had investigators documenting every meeting, every hotel visit, every pathetic love note you exchanged with that woman. I was simply waiting to see how far you would go." My mother came to stand beside him, her expression ice cold. "You had every opportunity to be a decent husband, to appreciate what you had. Instead, you chose betrayal. This is the consequence." Derek turned to me, desperation creeping into his voice. "Julissa, please. We can talk about this. I made a mistake, but we can work through it. I was confused. Megan manipulated me. I never meant to hurt you. I looked at the man I had married, the man who had stood in front of our families minutes ago and declared another woman as his true wife, and felt nothing but contempt. Before I could respond, Theodore continued his presentation. There is more, Mr. Lawson. The house you have been living in is titled solely in Ms. Harrington's name. You will be required to vacate the premises within 48 hours. Megan's face had gone completely white. She grabbed Derek's arm. What about his job? He is still a senior associate at his company. You cannot touch that. My father smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Ah, yes, the company. Let me explain something to you, Ms. Sinclair. The firm Mr. Lawson works for is a subsidiary of Harrington Capital Partners. In other words, he works for me. Derek stumbled backward as if he had been struck. That is not possible. I would have known. We have several holding companies with different names. It keeps things tidy. As of 9 o'clock this morning, your employment has been terminated. The official reason will be violation of the company's ethics policy regarding romantic relationships between employees of different rank. Theodore pulled out another document. Additionally, given the circumstances of your termination, you will find it challenging to secure employment elsewhere in this industry. Mr. Harrington's network is extensive, and his word carries considerable weight. Megan dropped Derek's arm like he was on fire. Her calculating eyes darted around the room, probably searching for an exit strategy. The man she had spent 2 years pursuing had suddenly become worthless. Theodore was not finished. As for Ms. Sinclair, our investigation has uncovered some interesting patterns. This is not the first time you have pursued a married man with wealth, is it? He opened another folder, this one thicker than the first. Before Mr. Lawson, there was a Mr. Richard Pemberton, VP of a marketing firm. The affair ended when his wife discovered it and filed for divorce. Before that, a Mr. Alan Cressley, heir to a shipping fortune. That relationship ended when his family threatened to disinherit him. Megan's composure shattered. You cannot do this. You cannot expose my private life in front of all these people. I am not exposing anything, Theodore replied calmly. I am simply presenting facts that are relevant to the current situation. Facts that demonstrate a pattern of deliberate interference in marriages for personal gain. Derek turned to Megan, his expression shifting from fear to something uglier. Is this true? Was I just another target to you? Megan did not answer. She did not have to. Her silence said everything. My father nodded to 2 security guards who had appeared near the ballroom entrance. Please escort Mr. Lawson and Miss Sinclair from the premises. This is a family celebration, and their presence is no longer appropriate. Derek tried one last time. He pulled away from the approaching guards and walked toward me, dropping to his knees, right there in the middle of the ballroom. Julissa, please. I am begging you. Give me another chance. I was wrong. I was so wrong. But I can change. I can be the husband you deserve. I looked down at him, at this man who had promised to love me forever, who had stood in our living room and said my family's money did not matter to him, who had just minutes ago called another woman his true wife. You stood in front of everyone I love. I said, my voice steady, despite the trembling in my chest. And you told them that someone else was your real wife. You made your choice, Derek. You announced it publicly, proudly, like you expected applause. Now you get to live with the consequences. I stepped back from him. Get out. The security guards took Derek and Megan by the arms and guided them toward the exit. Megan went quietly, her face a mask of shock and defeat. Derek called my name twice more before the ballroom doors closed behind them, cutting off his voice mid-plea. The silence that followed lasted only a moment before Aunt Patricia started clapping. Then my mother joined in. Then my cousin Marcus and Grace and everyone else who had witnessed what just happened. My father walked over and put his arm around me. "I am sorry you had to go through this," he said quietly. "But you handled it with dignity. I am proud of you." I leaned into his embrace, finally allowing myself to feel the full weight of what had just happened. That night, I lost a husband. But I also found something I had been missing for years myself. The days following the party passed in a strange haze. I moved through time like I was underwater, everything muffled and distant. The divorce proceedings began almost immediately, and true to Theodore's word, Derek received nothing. He did not even try to contest it. Without money for lawyers and no standing to argue, he had no choice but to sign whatever papers were placed in front of him. I stayed with my parents for the first few weeks. My old childhood bedroom had been preserved almost exactly as I had left it, and there was something comforting about sleeping in the same bed where I had once dreamed about my future. A future that looked nothing like this. Sleep did not come easily. I would lie awake for hours, replaying the events at the party, replaying the 2 years of my marriage, when I had been oblivious to Derek's betrayal. I wondered what I had missed, what signs I should have seen, what I could have done differently. In the quiet darkness of 3 a.m, the questions were relentless. Grace came over almost every day. She did not try to fill the silence with empty reassurances or cliched advice. She just sat with me. Sometimes we watched movies without speaking. Sometimes she brought food and made sure I ate. Sometimes she just held my hand while I stared out the window at nothing. "You are going to be okay," she said one afternoon, her voice gentle but certain. "I know it does not feel like it now, but you will." I wanted to believe her. I was not sure I did yet. News about Derek filtered through in fragments. Marcus kept me informed, probably more than I wanted to know. Derek had been forced to move back in with his parents in a small town 3 hours outside the city. His reputation in the real estate industry was ruined. No one would touch him. The golden boy who had bragged about his big deals and important connections was now unemployable. Megan vanished almost immediately after the party. According to Marcus, she had left the state within a week, probably searching for new opportunities elsewhere. I wondered if she felt any guilt for what she had done. I doubted it. Women like her saw relationships as transactions, and when a deal went bad, they simply moved on to the next one. Derek tried to contact me several times, emails that I deleted without reading, phone calls that went straight to voicemail. Once he showed up at my parents' gate, but security turned him away before he could get within 100 feet of the house. I did not want his apologies. I did not want his explanations. I did not want anything from him ever again. About a month after the divorce was finalized, my father found me sitting alone in the garden. It was late evening, and the sky was painted in shades of orange and pink. He settled into the chair beside me without speaking, and we watched the sun sink below the horizon together. "Do you want to talk about it?" he finally asked. I do not know what to say. I pulled my cardigan tighter around my shoulders. I keep thinking I should have known. I should have seen what he was. "Nobody sees everything," my father said quietly. "Not even me. And I have spent 50 years learning to read people." I looked at him. "You said you knew about the affair almost from the beginning. Why did you not tell me?" He was silent for a long moment, considering his words carefully. "Because some lessons cannot be taught. They have to be lived." He turned to face me fully. "If I had come to you 3 months into Derek's affair and told you what I knew, what would you have done?" I thought about it honestly. I probably would not have believed you, or I would have made excuses for him. I would have said you were wrong, that you just did not like him. Exactly. You needed to discover the truth in your own way, in your own time. All I could do was make sure that when it all fell apart, you would not lose too much in the process. I understood now why he had insisted on the prenuptial agreement, why he had never fully welcomed Derek into the family, why he had kept careful records and documented everything. He had been protecting me the whole time in his own way. Your mother and I, he continued, we built our marriage on honesty, respect, partnership. When I married her, I did not care about her background or her family's status. I cared about who she was as a person. That is the only foundation that lasts. I thought about my parents married for 35 years and still holding hands at dinner parties, still laughing at each other's jokes, still presenting a united front against whatever challenges came their way. How do I trust anyone again after this? I asked. You do not have to figure that out today. He reached over and patted my hand. Take your time. Heal first. The right person will come when you are ready, and when they do, you will know the difference. I spent the next several months focusing on myself. I returned to my work, throwing myself into design projects with a new intensity. I started seeing a therapist, working through the trauma of betrayal with someone trained to help. I reconnected with old friends I had neglected during my marriage, rebuilding relationships that had withered from inattention. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, I began to feel like myself again. My mother invited me to join her at charity events, and I discovered that helping others was surprisingly healing. I volunteered at a women's shelter, working with women who had survived much worse than I had. Their resilience inspired me. Their strength reminded me of my own. 6 months after the divorce, I made a decision. I was going to open my own design studio. No more working for other firms, building someone else's dream. It was time to build my own. I found a perfect space in a renovated warehouse downtown. Large windows, exposed brick, plenty of room for a small team to grow. I signed the lease on a Tuesday afternoon, standing in the empty space with sunlight streaming through the glass, feeling something I had not felt in a long time. Hope. Grace and a few other close friends came to the opening celebration. They brought champagne and flowers and way too much food. We laughed and talked and made plans for the future. At one point, Grace pulled me aside. I am so proud of you, she said, her eyes bright with emotion. Look at what you have built. Look at who you have become. I hugged her tightly. I could not have done it without you. Later that evening, after everyone had gone home, I stood alone in my new studio. The city lights glittered through the windows. The space smelled like fresh paint and new beginnings. I caught my reflection in the glass and studied it for a moment. The woman looking back at me was not the same woman who had cried alone in her car 6 months ago. She was someone new, someone stronger, someone better. 1 year has passed since the night my husband stood up at a family gathering and declared another woman as his true wife. 1 year since my father made that phone call. 1 year since everything I thought I knew about my life fell apart. I am sitting in my studio now as I share this story with you. The afternoon light is soft through the windows, and somewhere in the background I can hear my small team laughing about something. We have grown to 5 people now, handling more projects than I ever imagined possible when I first signed that lease. Life is good. Different than I planned, but good. I still think about Derek sometimes, though, not with the pain I once felt. The last I heard, he was working at a small regional agency somewhere in the Midwest, a far cry from the high-powered career he once imagined for himself. I do not know if he ever found whatever it was he was looking for. I do not really care anymore. What I know is that I found something much more valuable than the marriage I lost. I found myself. The journey was not easy. There were nights when the loneliness felt unbearable, when I questioned every choice I had ever made, when I wondered if I would ever feel whole again. But I kept going, one day at a time, one step at a time. And eventually, the steps started to feel lighter. I learned things during this past year that I want to share with you. I learned that not everyone who says they love you actually does. Words are easy. Actions tell the truth. Watch how someone treats you when they think no one is looking. Watch how they behave when there is nothing to gain from being kind. That is who they really are. I learned that your worth is not determined by how someone treats you. When Derek betrayed me, I spent weeks wondering what I had done wrong, what I was lacking, why I was not enough. But the truth is, his choices were about him, not me. His inability to be faithful was his flaw, not mine. You are not diminished by someone else's lack of character. I learned that sometimes the greatest gift someone can give you is showing their true colours before it is too late. If Derek had been a better liar, if he had hidden his affair for another 10 years, imagine how much more of my life would have been wasted. His arrogance in publicly declaring his mistress actually freed me sooner than a more careful betrayal would have. There is a strange gratitude in that. I learned that family is not just about blood. It is about the people who stand by you when your world falls apart. Grace, who sat with me in silence when words were not enough. My parents, who protected me without suffocating me. Aunt Patricia, who threw out a guest from her own anniversary party without hesitation. These are the people who matter. These are the relationships worth investing in. I learned about forgiveness too, though perhaps not in the way you might expect. I have not forgiven Derek. I am not sure I ever will, and I am not sure I need to. But I have forgiven myself. I have released the guilt I felt for not seeing the truth sooner, for believing his lies, for wanting so badly to be loved that I ignored all the warning signs. I was not stupid. I was human. And being human means sometimes we get hurt. Most importantly, I learned that endings can become beginnings. The death of my marriage gave birth to something new, a business I am proud of, a sense of independence I never knew I needed, a deeper understanding of my own strength. These things would not exist if Derek had been the man I believed him to be. I do not know what the future holds. Maybe I will fall in love again someday. Maybe I will not. Either way, I know I will be okay. I am enough on my own. Any future partner would be an addition to my happiness, not the source of it. That is a lesson worth learning, even if the tuition was painful. If you are watching this and going through something similar, I want you to know that you are not alone. The pain you feel today will become the strength you need tomorrow. Every tear you cry is washing away a version of you that accepted less than you deserved. Every sleepless night is preparing you for the dawn that is coming. You will survive this. You will grow from this. And one day, you will look back and understand why it all had to happen. I promise you, it gets better. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to walk away from someone who betrayed your trust? How did you find the strength to rebuild? Share your story in the comments below. Sometimes the most healing thing we can do is remind each other that we are not alone in our struggles. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps me reach more people who might need to hear these words today. And if you know someone who is going through a difficult time, share this video with them. Sometimes a story is exactly what someone needs to find their courage. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being here. Thank you for caring. I wish you strength in your struggles, clarity in your confusion, and peace in your healing. You deserve happiness. Never let anyone make you believe otherwise. Until next time, take care of yourself. You are worth it.